Ah, yes. I love the Spanish call. Dave comes through with the audio. Welcome back, Steeler fans, to another episode of the Steelers Free. What a great way. I love those guys are so passionate. Just my kids walk around the house. My wife hates it. They go, pick it up, Pickens, pick it up, Pickens, pick it up, Pickens. So, all right. Welcome back to another Steelers preview. I'm Jeff Hartman of Behind the Steel Curtain. Joining me as always, Dave Schofield. What's up, Dave?
Not much, Jeff. Good to see you again. Ready to talk some Steelers and whatever questions you ask. I guess we have to talk about it.
We will. I will. This is my ship. We will get to the destination. I promise. Bryan, what's up, Bryan?
Oh man, I'm having a great week. I'm on an episode of Let's Ride this week, and the Steelers brought back Matt Canada for another year, and I've been telling you for months that they need to retain this guy. So
wait a second. Does this mean there's going to be 3 straight podcasts of Bryan Anthony Davis? We are going, right?
Yeah,
because it'll be preview. It'll be Let's Ride. It'll be here we go. Man,
that's bad overload.
Ask my wife and kids. They've bad overload.
I've met your wife and kids. They would agree. Okay. Now, we're going to do this old school. Normally, sometimes I am, all over the map with how we start the show. We're going to talk about Matt Canada. We'll get there, but we want to start about some news first. I want to get your all's thoughts on Brian Flores. This came out Thursday afternoon. He's going to be interviewed for another defensive coordinator position, and this one's with the Atlanta Falcons. He did interview, or at least the Steelers allowed him to interview for the Cleveland job, and they chose Jim Schwartz instead. Folks need to remember this. The litigation against the National Football League was not dropped. It was not settled. It is still ongoing. But Dave, what do you think about Flores potentially leaving?
I think it's more likely if he gets a head coaching job. I don't know if he would he want to move into a coordinator job, knowing that he's going to be ultimately looking for a head coaching job the next year. Do you want to move into it for 1 year? I mean, Mike Tomlin moved into it for 1 year before he came to the Steelers. Yep. It's something you got to think about. Obviously, if it's a head coaching job, it's completely different. And I have no problem with him choosing to go if that's the case. If it's a coordinator job, as long as he's not going to Cleveland, I guess it's not terrible.
Okay, Bryan, thoughts on Flores?
I think if you're Brian Flores, you've got to ask yourself one question. Why am I being interviewed, and do I have a legitimate shot? Because that's why there's litigation right now. If I'm Brian Flores, I'm looking at the big picture. And the first part of the big picture is, where are the Pittsburgh Steelers going? And if he feels like the Pittsburgh Steelers are going up, and there's a reason to stay, and there's a reason to have loyalty to Mike Tomlin for bringing him in, he knows that if they have a good season next year, that he's probably on a short list for head coaches all over. But you don't turn down interviews anywhere.
Yeah.
If you're getting a defensive coordinator interview, you take it, you see what's out there, you see what they're saying, and you bring it back, and you make that decision for what's best for you and your family. And then you take other things into consideration, because in this league, you can bet on yourself as a coach a whole lot easier by waiting 1 more year for that right job. Because if you take the wrong job, and I'm talking guys like Todd Haley, who went into a situation where he wasn't ready. If he would have stuck around, he might have been in better situations, but he went to the Chiefs and he fell flat on his face. You might have situations that just don't take a job because it's being offered to you, like a Jets job. If the Jets is the only job that I'm being offered, I'm running away from it, because it's a place where careers go to die as head coaches. Or the Washington Commanders. That's another place. It's a job, but I'd rather stay in one spot where I could look for the best possible position while stay in a great position than just take the job. It's like if you're a chef and you there's a 5-star restaurant that you'd love to get in New York City, but for the meantime, you just want to be a chef somewhere, and you decide to go ahead and take a job at the Western Steer, that's not doing anything for your career.
I'm going to have to disagree with you a little bit, Bryan, based on the fact that Bryan Flores, there were a lot of people that thought that this guy was going to get blackballed by the league. You sue the league and accuse all these teams of doing all these wrongful things, whether it is the Miami Dolphins and the shenanigans they did and they pulled with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. That did happen, by the way. Hate that guy. Anyways, or if it's with the Denver Broncos and them showing up drunk to an interview, not taking it serious. I mean, these are damning statements that he made about the National Football League. I kind of feel like even if it were a team like the Houston Texans, now the Houston Texans are low right now, but their future could be bright considering the draft capital they have accrued with the Deshaun Watson trade. And you got to take that job. I know that's not a good spot in terms of, in your analogy, the chef and the restaurant where you might be going, but you got to take that job. You don't know if you're going to get another chance, right? Like, you don't know if you're going to get another chance to be a head coach in the National Football League. There's only 32 of these jobs. And if someone is willing to offer you that, and for him, there's not 32 because Miami's not hiring him. Denver's not hiring him. So now there's only 30. Pittsburgh's not looking for a new coach, although a lot of people would like them to. New England, you can see what I'm going with this.
And the Giants, too. Yeah, I get that.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, that's just my thoughts. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, there's only 32 of them in the world that have that job as a head coach. So sometimes, if it's really tough, because I kind of get what Bryan's saying is, if you take the wrong job and that's your one shot, your one opportunity, that then it could completely backfire on you. You're not going to get a chance again. But then if you don't take that opportunity, who's to say you'll ever get an opportunity somewhere else? It's a delicate balance. It really is. So to me, I think he has appreciation for the Pittsburgh Steelers because they offered him a position when others wouldn't, when it was at the bad.
He better have an appreciation for
so trust me, it's not that he has any problems with Pittsburgh, but at the same time, you can't fault a guy for wanting to move up, even if it is one of those other franchises that might not be in the best position right now.
Go ahead, Bryan.
Let me just amend this to, let's take head coach off the table.
Okay.
Because I completely agree. If you go and become a head coach,
coordinator, I get what you're. That makes a lot more sense. A lot more sense. Yeah. Now I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's good.
For DC, I think that's a different situation. You're right. I mean, you still need to take the Texans job, and I love that you said that, and I love that you guys disagreed with me on it too, because this is something that needs to be discussed. I think when you guys just talked about the appreciation for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that comes in to a lot of play if it's just a defensive coordinator role.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Absolutely.
Like, so he might have gone on that interview in Cleveland, and we don't know. He could have sat there and listened to Kevin Stefanski and the clowns that they have up there in Cleveland, the mistake by the lake. And he could have left that interview saying, even if they offer me this job, I'm not taking it. I don't want any part of that coaching staff. I don't want to be there. I'd rather stay in Pittsburgh for another year than go there. Than that I could see. But a head coaching job, okay, enough Flores talk. Let's talk about the fact this was news that we covered, Dave covered today for the website, behindthesteelcurtain.com. Make sure you check that out. And it was all about that the NFL announced the 5 teams that will be playing international games in 2023. And much to the dismay of Art Rooney II, who has very publicly stated that he wants the Steelers to play in Mexico because there is such a strong contingent of Steeler faithful in Mexico. And the Steelers get 8 home games this year because the NFC 9. The NFC travels to the AFC location for that 17th game. And they're not. They are playing some opponents that are going to be playing overseas games. Jacksonville, New England, I saw, but they're not going to be playing Pittsburgh overseas. There's no international games. Dave, does that disappoint you, or are you happy that the Steelers are staying stateside?
To me, as someone who I wouldn't be able to watch them internationally in person, I like the notion of them not having to travel as far. Now, I want to clean up a couple things because I did the article. They named these 5 teams. They didn't come out and say they were the home teams, but they're the home teams. Why else would you announce these teams? And the NFL has started, they started this in 2021 when they went to 17 games, that it's the conference that has the extra home game that will have all but one of the international games be their home game. And the other one is because the Jacksonville Jaguars are always taking a home game in London. That's what they agreed to. That's what they asked for. That's what they want. There is no game in Mexico this year. That's the one thing. So if Steeler fans are like, oh, no Mexico game, there is no Mexico game because they are making renovations to the stadium there. So there is nobody playing in Mexico this year. For that reason, maybe it's better if the Steelers are willing to play in Mexico that it's not this year, because there could be no Mexico. And are they going to make them have to play international 2 years in a row? Probably not. So maybe that's better in the long run. And if the Steelers are going to play anywhere international, I would like to see that in Mexico. I want to hear the Spanish announcers even more and everything else.
Najee.
Yeah, get Najee Harris down there with all that. And you're not crossing as many time zones because you're going more south. Obviously, you're also going west, but you're, like I said, not crossing as many time zones, which could mess with everything as the season goes on. So that's ultimately how I feel about it. And the reason that I said that about the home teams is the Steelers do play 3 of those teams that have games international, but they're all scheduled to be at Acrisure Stadium. They're all in Pittsburgh. And from my understanding, the Steelers' lease isn't for 8 regular season home games. At least in the past, their lease with the stadium was for 10 games between preseason and regular season. So if the Steelers still have that lease, then they can't be a home team going away and giving up that game. So maybe next year on a team that they're playing, maybe one of their NFC opponents will be put down in Mexico, and the Steelers can be the away team for that one.
Bryan, what are your thoughts on the international game and the Steelers not being in one this year?
I have no problem with it. I think it's actually cool. I love the idea of them being there. I know how much it upsets the apple cart, and it puts the travel's tough. And I remember just that debacle 10 years ago when they played the Minnesota Vikings in England. But I would love to go internationally and see that game. My gosh, if they play in Mexico, I'm going to do everything I can to get down there. I think that would be just absolutely fabulous to be there. Those fans are incredible. Down there, they really do take to the Steelers, and I think that's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and this is not my trivia question, but when was the only time the Pittsburgh Steelers played in Mexico City?
Oh, that preseason game, but what season was it? It wasn't even the most recent because
in the 90s, wasn't it?
Because they played a preseason game in Toronto at one point, but it was in the 2000s, but I don't think it was in the 2010s, was it?
It was 2001 against the Indianapolis Colts.
Really? 2001.
Oh, preseason?
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, it was preseason.
They've never played
in Mexico in the regular season
a game.
But like someone said in the live chat, if the Steelers are the away team when they go to Mexico, that's like giving them another home game.
Yeah. That's true. It's not that's not their
fault. But that's what it is with however many places Steelers play.
Yeah,
that's not their fault.
They were the away team against the Minnesota Vikings, and they were the home team there.
Yeah. How many I don't know the answer to this. Is not trivia. Jeff doesn't do trivia. How many regular season international games have the Steelers played? I mean, I know the Vikings game in London.
I think that's the only regular season.
Is that the only regular season game they've played internationally?
That's all I know of.
To my knowledge, they've never played in Toronto as far as a regular season game.
Yeah, because they played the preseason, right?
Yeah. Now we've seen them in Barcelona against the San Francisco 49ers in like 92 or 93.
They were in Ireland.
They were in Ireland in 97 against the Bears, one of their first preseason games. Of course, Mexico City, they played a few times in Toronto, but never really The only time they played in England was a regular season game, if I'm not mistaken.
And that was 2013.
Yes.
Because that was the
0-4
0-4 start.
Greg Jennings catching a touchdown pass. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
I was playing in a golf tournament, listening to it on the radio.
Le'Veon Bell's first career touchdown was in that
Yes.
game.
You know, I have friends that they're practically family that live in England. They sent me a mini helmet of the game in England with the 2 helmets on there. They sent me a scarf, because scarves are big in European football. And they sent me programs. They sent me so much cool stuff. And they love when these teams come over there. They flock there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So no Steelers. I want to ask you all, you know what? We'll do it for next week. I've literally been putting this topic off for like 3 weeks. I'll do it next week. Let's talk about Matt Canada. You know, Matt Canada comes back and Steeler fans start freaking out. And those of us on this show, I've talked to all of you individually. I've had you on my podcast. We talk all the time on our Slack channel. None of us were shocked by this news.
Come on, Jeff.
What?
It was the perfect setup to say individually and collectively.
No, yeah. Well, I'm not Mike Tomlin. But you're right. I could have said that. None of us were surprised when they retained Matt Canada. I go on Twitter that evening when they make it official, where Burt Lawton says he will be back. This is not Jerry Dulac, old Jer Bear, tweeting out what he thinks from his sources. And this isn't Mark Caballi of The Athletic saying that everything's being held up because Mike Tomlin has a personal matter to attend to. No, this is Burt Lawton saying he'll be back. And Twitter is ablaze with Steelers hate. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I said, are you all really shocked about this? Because I'm not. Dave, you weren't shocked, right?
No, exactly. I was not shocked. Honestly, I'm going to tell you the truth. I started to have a big change of heart about everything Tuesday. And here, if you don't mind me telling the story, here's why. Because I'm looking more into stuff. Jeffrey is throwing crazy numbers in the Slack channel that he then turned into a fantastic cutting room floor podcast, perfect for a stat geek like me, that he had on Tuesday. Absolutely loved it. If you haven't caught that, go listen to it, because people that are trying to say that the Steelers offense is a dumpster fire, you need to listen to Jeffrey's podcast, because you don't understand what teams are trying to do in the NFL. Although everyone's thinks that it's all about you got to score 50 points in order to win. You don't. And some of the best teams in the NFL right now are proving that you don't. So, but with all that going on, and I was looking, and Jeffrey and I were doing our Vertex that came out on Thursday today about the Steelers run game and the schemes that they had going there and how it improved over the second half. I'm digging into all these stats, and I'm looking at the Steelers run game, and I'm like, wow, this is really getting going. Wow, this really does have a lot to do with what Matt Canada was scheming. And then there was the report that Mike Tomlin wanted Byron Leftwich as his coordinator. Now, I've always been a big Byron Leftwich fan. When I was asked last year, the year before, whenever it was, I don't remember, who would you want as a head coach if Mike Tomlin stepped away? That was my guy. That's who I said. But when I started looking at Leftwich, and I started looking at how bad the rushing attack has been, where he's been the offensive coordinator. The passing game has been great, but they had no rushing attack. Look at it again this year in Tampa. Terrible run game for various reasons. And I started to actually get a little bit scared, and I started to ask myself, if I could only choose one or the other, which is a shame if that's what you have to do, give me the run game. So that's when I was more like, I don't know that I'd really want to step away from Matt Canada. But man, oh man, if they could add some passing game attack coordinator, assistant offensive person of football, that would be fantastic. I don't know for sure that they will, but a lot of teams have run game coordinator, pass game coordinators that are official. The Steelers have them. They just don't announce them as official titles. So I was starting to warm more on the idea of Matt Canada. I'm like, it's a lot easier in today's NFL to bring your passing game along if you have a good run game to lean on. if you're trying to do nothing but pass and it's not perfect, it's not like the run game is going to start to take off after that. So that's just my opinion. So I started to warm up on that on Tuesday. So when I was heard he was coming back, part of me is like, man, I wish they could have somebody better. But then part of me was starting to think about, man, could they actually put someone in there that would even be worse? And that was me living in my fears.
All right, Bryan, you were the guy that did not want this news to happen, and it did. What was your thoughts?
When it happened, when I found out for sure, it's just like, all right, pass the milk. I that's what happened, because you said, look, none of us are shocked. And the reason none of us are shocked, we saw this with Randy Fichtner. Randy Fichtner, if you put Randy Fichtner up against Matt Canada, I tell you what, I'm still taking Matt Canada at that point, because I thought Randy, they might have had more 30-point games. They might have done better things. In some instances, I just thought he was a complete dumpster fire, and he was not set to be there. When you think about the fact that there's a little bit of a progression and you don't want to go ahead and upset things from year 1 to year 2 with Kenny Pickett, I could buy into that. I could understand that. When you know that the Steelers typically don't like to fire a guy and will let them just have the contract expire, this is something Dave's been a champion of and has talked about for a long time. He talked about it with Randy Fichtner too. When you think about that, you're like, all right, it all falls into place. But one thing that we talk about tomorrow on Here We Go, the Steelers show with KT Smith, is the fact that this is it for Matt Canada. And a lot of you really want to root for Matt Canada to get a new contract, because if Matt Canada gets a new contract, it means that they have a boom year on offense, because another subpar or another ho-hum year, he's gone. So this is basically it. This is the final year of the experiment, because the experiment either becomes over and he's entrenched and he's the guy because the team is having success, or you're done with him. He's gone and you start over again. Which one are you guys going to choose? Each and every one of us are going to choose Matt Canada getting a new contract, because that means they have a fantastic year.
Yeah. I mean, for me, everyone, fan base, whether social media, here in the live chat, doesn't matter. Everyone has made their thoughts and feelings about Matt Canada very clear. And whether you think that he could be back and be okay, whether you think that he should be gone, which a lot of people do, I get it. The one thing I didn't understand was the sentiment that if Kenny Pickett somehow was given his 2 cents on the deal, like that he shouldn't have that. There was a large sentiment, especially on Twitter, that said that Kenny Pickett's not experienced enough to be able to have a say. Well, the fact that he was your first round draft pick, the fact that he came in halftime of week 4, the fact that he is going to be your quarterback next year, he should have a say in this. Should he have the final say? No. But should he have a say? Absolutely. And everything you've heard from Kenny Pickett, who is very media savvy already as a rookie, I'm going to give him credit for that. He speaks well. He's not the Ben Roethlisberger that'll throw those little slides in there. He just kind of just plays it straight. For me, I mean, I listened to Kenny Pickett on Cam Hayward's podcast. I know he did an interview with Dale Lawley on Steelers.com. I haven't checked that out yet. And he talked about how he was excited for 2023 and working with Matt Canada. And they think that they can build upon the success they saw late in the season. Dave, when you heard that Kenny Pickett could, which was just rumor, by the way, you okay with that? Or did you think that it was going to be like, hey, that's not anything Kenny Pickett should really have any say in?
Well, I actually had somebody email me about this and ask the question, and I gave a brief response where I said, if the team knows that they want to move on from Canada, they move on from Canada. If the team knows they want to stay with Canada, they stay with Canada. If the team is like, well, should we really do this year? Then you look for more information. I mean, I'll give you Brian Anthony Davis Well, no, I should say bad because this is more bad than Brian Davis. Example: if it's 1:45 a.m. and you're sitting at the bar and you look over and because it's not 2 a.m. yet, and you see somebody and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go talk to her. You go talk to her. If you see someone, you're like, man, I'm not sure I'm going to go talk to her. I don't know. No, I'm not going to do that. Then you don't. But then if you look, you're like, well, it's getting close to 2 a.m. Should I go talk? Hey, guys, what do you think of that girl over there? That's what you do. And Kenny Pickett, Jeff's infamous frat boy, that's who you ask. You're going to ask someone who their opinion actually matters with everything. But if you're indecisive, then you ask your quarterback to bring in the information. If because you don't want to do it if you're fairly certain you're going to let him go, and you ask the quarterback and he says, no, I want to keep him, and then you still let him go, what did that just tell your quarterback? So you only bring that into the equation as if you really need help making the actual decision. And I have a feeling the Steelers made the decision on their own before they had to do that.
Do you all see it too, right? The frat boy, Kenny Pickett frat boy. Do you all see it, right?
Only because you talk about it, and
he wears the hat backwards all the time in interviews. He has the flow that he's got the longer hair. His favorite movie is Wedding Crashers. His favorite food is buffalo chicken quesadillas, and that's why they call him Quesadilla Kenny on What Yin's Talking About. The dude's a frat guy. He's a frat boy, and that's fine. I was a frat guy. There's nothing wrong with that. I think Bryan was a frat guy too. So
I didn't have to pay for my friends. I was good.
You don't pay for them, baby. No. Hold on. That's a narrative.
I just was trying to mess with you.
You don't pay for them. You lease them for 3 to 4 years. And then
you lease them? That's a good one.
That's always my comeback when people say I don't need to pay for my friends. I don't pay for them. I lease them for 3 to 4 years, and then I move on. It's just like a car.
I thought it really upset you, but no, that's a great comeback.
And Dave,
I was just totally messing because that's one of those things.
No,
that was
trust me, it's not the
there
first time I've heard that.
If it wasn't for a fraternity, Dave, there'd be no 2 a.m. stories.
There probably wouldn't be.
There's a lot of 2 a.m. stories. Okay, Bryan, enough frat talk.
Come on. Bryan needs to come back and give me my kudos for telling such a great story that would make him proud.
Yeah, go for it.
I liked it, and now I'm looking at the live chat. I'm finding out Dill with it was one of my rival fraternities. So, man, I guess I got to go to battle with Dill with it now.
What was your fraternity, Bryan?
We were Acacia at Pitt Johnstown.
What is that?
It just had a Greek name instead of Greek letters. We had the jackets.
Heard of a fraternity that doesn't have Greek letters.
Me neither. But
it was an international fraternity. It was a true Greek. It was born at the University of Michigan in 1903. There you go.
I was a Lambda Chi Alpha, Boston University, 1909. There you go. And Dill Whitted almost died pledging. We all almost died pledging. Trust me.
Yeah, trust me.
Right, go ahead, Bryan.
So, Dave, I thought that was great. I love you delving into 2 a.m. I'd like to, one of those things, I don't have too many regrets. So when I build my time machine, I want it to be fun. So I want to take guys like Jeff Hartman and Dave Schofield back to 1992 or 1991 and hang out at the Gingerbread Man in Johnstown, PA with one Bryan Anthony Davis. So I think I would just like to see 92?
that. I would be 13 or 14.
No, I'd be taking you.
Okay, you taking okay, that's good.
Here comes 8-year-old Jeff.
I'll be honest with you. Even when I was 13 years old, I could possibly pass for getting into an adult establishment.
And 8-year-old Jeff is
huge.
Walking out with a handful of phone numbers.
Yeah, 8-year-old Jeff, man.
Mac Daddy.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the main crux of this show. And that is that I think, in my opinion, and a lot of people are going to disagree with this, I want to get your all's take on it, is that I think there's more pressing needs or issues is the word that we chose for the title than just Matt Canada. Think about the roster in and of itself. Dave and I did our team needs podcast for Let's Ride on Monday. there's a lot. There's a lot that you could choose from in terms of prioritizing roster needs. And would you say that Matt Canada in the offensive play calling, Dave, we'll start with you, would even be near the top 5 in terms of concerns that you have for the team heading into 2023?
I mean, it would possibly be in the top 5 because my concern is regression from where the Steelers progressed to the end of the year. Now, I understand when players, have the offseason and come back that they're not going to be the exact same player they were and in tune as they were with the same roster and all that stuff at the end. But you want your coach to be able to keep rolling right from where he was, where it left off. I don't want to see any kind of regression there. Other than that, it's not there. But this is also the guy that for my top 5 team needs, my top 4 were all on defense.
Yeah, that's true. What about you, Bryan? Where does Matt Canada kind of rank in terms of your concerns for the 2023 Steelers?
I'm still saying he's about number 3 at this point because right now we know this. Just like Jeff renting and leasing his friends for 3 to 4 years, that's what they did with Matt Canada. He's a rental looking to buy. And that's exactly what is. We just talked about that. That's what's going to happen this year. But the big thing for me is he going to regress? Is he going to be like, okay, I got my reprieve, I'm back, all right, let's just go back to all the crap that doomed us in the first 8 games? That terrible. And look, they went 7-2, but that offense wasn't anything you were going, woo! They finally got it. So that's where the success kind of scares me a little bit. Now, I get what Jeffrey said and everything, but there were a lot of times we're just seeing, oh, yuck. I mean, there was still a lot of yuck.
I'll be honest with you here. Okay, so for me, and we all see the game different, and that's natural. There were a lot of, wow, like this offense. There was one main issue, and that was punching the ball in
finishing the drive.
Finishing the drive.
Jeffrey talked about it Tuesday. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the big issue.
When it came down to those 10-plus play drives, I mean, they would just move it methodically down the field. It's tough to win that way. I get it. But, man, there was some promise there. And I can't stop thinking about what Najee Harris said after week 18 when he said the difference is that we started to actually execute. And he said that every play caller calls the same plays over and over again. But we as an offensive line, all the way through to the skill position players, started to actually execute. And so when I hear him say that, and I don't think Najee's the type of guy that is just out there to blow smoke. I mean, he's pretty honest to the media, at least in my opinion, he is. So for me, I'm not saying that Matt Canada is not a concern, but for me, I think there's more pressing issues with this team and even the offense than it is with the play caller, because if they can pick up where they left off, that's a big if. It'd be a huge boost. Dave, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, and I still am concerned with the play calling. That I think that you've pointed it out, Jeff, and therefore I notice it all the time. Anytime he gets thrown off schedule, it's a problem. A penalty in
any negative play.
I'll be honest with you. I felt like the whole offense was thrown off for at least 2 drives after Najee fumbled at the goal line. That even something from a previous drive seemed to throw him off. But and I don't like the predictability of it, like when when it's run versus when it's pass. But that was going on with Canada's first year as a quarterback coach because he was doing the run game stuff. Feeder was, and it was so. They were so separate from each other that based on who was on the field and what and how you went to do stuff, you knew if it was going to be a run or a pass 3 seconds after they break the huddle. Now, also, I mean, here's an indication that kind of tells you how Matt Canada can kind of get into what he's going to do. Zach Gentry started 13 games for the Steelers this year. What does that tell you?
They're using a lot of 2 tight ends or heavy.
That you knew they were coming out in a run formation to start the game.
Yeah.
That most likely that very first play was going to be a run play. I'll be honest with you. I called the same play, the first offensive play of the game. I think every game my first year calling plays, I know I called the same play to start every game. The second year we were running a little bit different stuff, but that's just kind of what you do. And if you find something that's working, sometimes you just ask yourself, okay, how many other plays do I have to run in between going back to this play because it works so well? That's just kind of how it goes. But as long as he can come through and not be so predictable. And if the Steelers can, whether they bring in somebody else from the outside, because you never know. We didn't expect to have a Bryan Flores coming onto the defense when Steelers fans heard of that last year, but or someone else that's on there that really can help with the passing game some. As long as you don't have the predictable play calling, I think they're fine. But the best way to not have predictable play calling is to be able to run the ball the way he wants to when they call the plays they want.
I mean, if you read Bill Cowher's book, which is a great read, he talks openly about, regardless of who the offensive coordinator was, Ken Wisenhunt, or if it was someone else that he had during his tenure at the Steelers, if they ran a play that was working, he'd get on the correct channel and he'd say, run it again on the other side. If it works again, run it again on the other side. He said they would run it until they stopped it. And I was like, wow, like that sounds really high school. Like Dave's talking about, like that sounds like something they would do in high school. He's doing it in the NFL. So sometimes I think that we as fans kind of overcomplicate things. And I do think that sometimes we as fans don't think about what the coordinators are having to work with. Think about Pat Meyer as a new offensive line coach coming into this team. Coming in pretty late, too, I felt like. I feel like he was a late hire last offseason. I could be wrong, but that's what it felt like. He has all these guys that are trying to gel. James Daniels, Mason Cole, Chukes Okorafor is a veteran, but, he's got to work with these new guys next to him. You got Dan Moore and a competition at left guard. Rookies in Kenny Pickett, Connor Hayward, Jalen Warren. You have George Pickens. You have Najee Harris only in year 2. Pat Freiermuth in year 2. When people say that some things were dumbed down, look at what I just said. I mean, anyone that's coached at any level knows that sometimes you have to dumb things down a little bit, water it down, if that's too harsh to say, dumb it down, so that they can run it successfully. And then you can build off of that. I feel like we kind of saw some of that. And yes, the philosophy changed a little bit coming out of the bye week, but not a ton. They just started to execute better. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts is basically you asked what I think the biggest issue is, and it's really the retention of free agents on defense and keeping that defense together. Because, look, you could throw in the fact that, Ogunjobi is injury prone. Look, no, he's a veteran. He's going to have bumps and bruises. We saw him on the list every single week. And how many games did he really miss? Maybe one or two at the most. One. Yeah. You need to retain a guy. And I'm tired of hearing, well, not at that price, not at this. No, if you still have to field a team. And there's a lot of mentality out there among fans that, unless you're an all pro or a rookie with the arrow severely going up, that you got to get rid of them because they understand pieces of the puzzle. They don't understand the fact that just like everything, you've got to have a low income guy in there too to fill out a team. Guys, we play FanDuel every single week.
Gotta find that cheap wide receiver.
Absolutely, yeah.
You do. You got 3 spots to fill. You got to find one cheap one.
You don't do it. So like there's a cap for a reason, and you've got to have those guys, and everybody has their role, and they know in-house better than anything. So if you say that, I've heard people wanting to get rid of Marcus Allen, Robert Spillane, and Miles Jack this year, along with Devin Bush. Who are you going to put an inside linebacker? Who are you going to put there?
You're going to move to Marvin Leal back to there too?
Yeah. So
to put next to Mark Robinson. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think about some of these people. Well, I wouldn't bring him back. He's not worth the money. You've got to have somebody in there, and somebody that is a tad bit above average is a lot better than an unknown that you're bringing in cheap and you're throwing them in cold.
There you go, Dave. What do you want to say?
Real quick, because I know we're going to get to our break, is that I know which GM said this today. I read it today. I know I did. That said, good players are going to get paid a lot of money. I'd rather have good players than cap space.
That's true.
That's what he said. He's like, you could talk about having cap space, but if you don't, you know what you got? Good players because you're paying them.
You can make shirts that just say F the cap space, kind of like the Rams had the FM picks shirts, just F the cap space.
That's awesome.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're YouTube, Facebook Live. We're not going anywhere, so stay tuned. And if you're listening on audio, there probably will be no ads, and we'll be right back. So we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and you probably didn't hear anything, and that's fine. What we're going to do now is no, it's not. I'm not blaming you.
No.
I was even telling Dave earlier today, it's not Brian's fault. They just aren't putting the ads in. So, hey, welcome back. I want to talk briefly, and I mean really briefly, about the divisional round of the playoffs. We have some interesting games coming up Saturday. The early game is Jacksonville at Kansas City. The night game is the New York Giants at the Philadelphia Eagles. Sunday, early game, Cincinnati at Buffalo. Dallas at San Francisco is the nightcap. Dave, which game are you excited the most to watch?
Honestly, it's got to be Cincinnati Buffalo. I mean, I was excited to watch that game in week 17, and unfortunately that didn't happen. And
has anyone heard what happened with Damar Hamlin? Like what the actual diagnosis was?
I don't know that they know to say. I wonder will they ever really know, or will it only ever be speculation? And if it's speculation, they might not want to say what it is. I think it's his right whether or not he shares it.
Oh yeah, for sure. But they could say that he was struck in the chest so hard that it caused his heart to stop. Like that would be okay. Or does he have a pre-existing condition? Like that was my question.
Yeah, I do not know, but I do know that he's been at the facility multiple times now, which is great news. But to me, I just want to see how that one would be. Ultimately, I know who I'm pulling for, but I think that should be a good one this weekend.
Who are you pulling for?
How we had all those free DraftKings $25 bets because I think I apparently got Jeff said I must have won an award to where they doubled it or something, that they were doubling some people's randomly because I had a bunch of them. And no, I didn't get to make $500 on the Steelers making the playoffs. That would have been great. I did put $25 on the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Good. Well,
there you go.
That's fine.
Yeah. Better than the Bengals.
I had to use up all these bets. I had like 2 days to use them up. So I had to do something.
So, Brian, which game are you most excited to watch?
Man, I tell you what, I've got most of them. In the AFC, I'm riveted by both of these games because the Jaguars really intrigue me. I don't think I know we talked about them covering. I know they can win. I still think the Chiefs win that game. I went ahead and picked the Bengals to beat the Buffalo Bills, but I would be devastated if that happens because I abhor them at this particular juncture. I abhor the Cincinnati Bengals more than the Baltimore Ravens this week. I found myself rooting for the Baltimore Ravens last week because the thought of anybody in black and orange celebrating being at the Super Bowl again this year just kind of makes me sweat. I don't want them ever to win a Super Bowl. So look, I don't
sound like Marky D.
Yeah, I tell you what,
it's the Bengals.
Yeah, he abhors the Bengals too. I'm using the word abhor too much. I just want to see what happens. I'm still really turned off by the entire coin flip by Joe Mixon. The coin flip mockery in the end zone. Big after that, I thought it was completely bad taste.
Bad taste. The NFL was a clown show for even thinking that that's okay.
Yeah. That was what
they did in high school where you have a coin flip. Like, give me a break.
I get that, but you've got, first of all, a horrible piece of human being for what he did in college and everything. And then and trying to put it. This was Damar Hamlin situation, and that was collateral damage. What happened, and all the good that Cincinnati did. Then they're mocking a coin flip when they should have been
But they handed them
three.
they handed them the North when that shouldn't have been what happened.
And they did, Dave.
They handed them the North, and they never should have handed them the North. I still liked my idea of saying, hey, the entire AFC North played Buffalo. Cincinnati had their game canceled against them. We do this in softball tournaments all the time. If something happens, you get rained out, but you all had a similar opponent. To figure out just the North standings, ignore every team's game against Buffalo. If Cincinnati doesn't have a game against Buffalo, then take away Baltimore's game, Pittsburgh's game, Cleveland's game, and then figure out the AFC North standings. Guess what? Then you would have had exactly what should have been happening going into this game, where if Cincinnati wins, they're the North champions, and if they don't, they're not.
Jeff, I'm not yelling at you, but I'm going to go on a bad rant, and I'm going to tell you why. Because this was
I
about
have questions for you too, but go ahead.
That's fine. This was about Damar Hamlin. It was the whole situation, and this is something that happened, and it was the best they could come up with, and Cincinnati made themselves the victim, and we're getting screwed by the league, and they completely discounted everything that happened on that field 6 days later by a mock coin flip, because they made it all about them, and it's classless. And then you have Zach Taylor going out to a Cincinnati bar and giving them the game ball. Oh, give me a break. I'm tired of this whole Bengal thing already. I want it to go away and go away fast. I will paint my body blue and red if I have to will the Bills to beat these butt munchers.
And just I know firsthand how much Bryan doesn't care for Bills fans as we were spooning.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Trust me. Now, I don't think that the Bengals, Joe Mixon's coin flip, which this is going way off the rails, and we apologize.
It's okay.
I don't think it has anything to do with Damar Hamlin. It's the NFL and the way they were handling the North. It was the way they were handling the AFC division, the AFC North division. But my questions, hold on, my questions for you. Let me talk. Did you like Joe Horn? Did you like Joe Horn from the New Orleans Saints?
When he hit the cell phone.
Shut up.
Right? Is that what you're talking about?
Shut up, Dave.
We're talking
I'm asking
about
Bryan a question.
2003.
Did you like Joe Horn?
I had no problem with Joe Horn at the time.
What about
I don't know.
Terrell Owens?
It was a stunt with a Sharpie.
Yeah, but it's a stunt. This is a stunt. It's the same thing. Did you have an issue with DeMarvin Leal doing chest compressions on Alex Highsmith after a sack against the Browns?
I feel like, you know what? I didn't have an issue with it.
You did or didn't?
I did not. And the reason I did not have an issue with it, because it wasn't premeditated. It was like a guy that was there knocked out. He wasn't, I guarantee you, he wasn't thinking about Damar Hamlin in the situation. But this was premeditated. He had it in his shoe. He had it in his shoe, and he was spitting in the face of the tragedy that happened 6 days earlier. And that's exactly what he was saying. Okay. Oh, we're getting screwed while a guy is fighting for his life in the hospital.
Well, I don't. Yeah, again. So we're going to disagree because I don't think that his issue was with the Bills or Hamlin or anything that happened. I think his issue was with the National Football League and how they're handling the AFC North. Dave, you want to chime in?
Division.
No, I was just going to say, yeah. I could see both ways of looking at it. I'm not going to disagree with what Bryan said, but at the same time, I understand exactly what Jeff is saying, that this wasn't anything to, you don't believe this had anything to do with the Buffalo Bills. And I don't either. Yeah. That it was simply of, hey, NFL, here's your coin flip. But at the same time, where I agree with Bryan is they handed the Bengals the North when they didn't win the game to seal it out. They did it based on their decision, and they could have figured out something better.
I'll still never forget Joe Horn going to the field goal post, taking out a flip phone, putting it up to the ear hole in his helmet, and acting like he was on the cell phone, thinking that's hysterical. And people hated it. Like my dad hated it. T.O. with the Sharpie in his sock, and he signs up. I'm like, that's really funny. Like, that's hysterical. And I even thought that Antonio Brown, when he scored against Washington on Monday Night Football, and he did the little booty dance, that's really funny. Maybe I'm sophomoric. Maybe not maybe. I am sophomoric. I find that stuff to be hysterical. And so people that get all up in arms over these celebrations, and I know, Bryan, it's not the celebration. It was the connotation behind it. But, man, hey, that's fun stuff to me. That's fun stuff. So, all right. Let's move on from the playoffs. We went off the rails there. We have some trivia to do. Bryan, go ahead. What's your trivia?
All right, this is going to be really quick. There are 4 teams in the AFC remaining, and we know who they are. It's Jacksonville, it's Cincinnati, it's the Chiefs, and the Bills. Only one of these teams do the Steelers have a winning record against. Excuse me. Only one of these teams do the Steelers not have a winning record against in the regular season. Who is it?
The teams that are remaining that they don't have a winning record against
In the regular season.
The Jaguars.
I think it's the Jaguars.
Yeah.
They are 13-14 overall against the Jaguars, but they are 0-2 in the playoffs against Jacksonville. There is one more team here that the Steelers are actually they do not have a winning record. They do have a win against them in the playoffs, but who's the team that they don't have a winning record against in the playoffs?
Of those 4 that are left?
Kansas City.
Yes. They are 1-2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And the funny thing, the Jaguars, Bengals, Chiefs, and Bills, every single playoff game against those guys were either home or away. They did not split home field with any of those teams. They played both Jacksonville and both the Bills at home in every single one of those games, and they played the Bengals and Chiefs on the road in every single one of those playoff games.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Good stuff. All right, Dave, what's your trivia?
All right. First things first, the quick question is, when is the last time the Pittsburgh Steelers played a postseason game against a team they did not face during the regular season that year?
Oh, I know. I listened.
Bryan, do you know?
I would have to say the Kansas City Chiefs. No, wait. Well, yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs in 2016 season.
They beat the Chiefs in the 2016 season during the regular season. Jeff, what's the answer?
The Tim Tebow game, the Denver Broncos.
The Denver Broncos game. Jeff knows this because this was on at the end of Stat Geek this morning. So I was just did that. I thought that was a great trivia, and then I did it on Stat Geek. I'm like, man, I should have saved it. All right. So
I swear all of your trivia is just to see if I listen to Stat Geek. Let's catch bad and a lie.
Yeah. No. Hey, do either of you know off the top of your head how many rushing attempts did the Steelers have this year?
Okay, I just did the season totals for the players. I'm not going to get all the. I'm going to say 450.
I'm going to say 350.
It was a nice, perfect round number of 500. The Steelers had 500 rushing attempts this year. That was 10th most in the NFL, with Atlanta being at the top at 559, Chicago 558. I'm not going to read them all. Okay. How many of those 500 attempts do you think the Pittsburgh Steelers had where they went for negative yards? Now, this does not count quarterback kneel downs. Take out the kneel downs. How many rushing plays do you think the Steelers had for negative yards this year?
50.
35.
Jefferson Hartman is really getting close on these. The answer is exactly averaging 2 a game. It would be 34. That was tied for 9th best in the NFL of having the fewest for negative yards. So even though sometimes it'd be frustrating, you're like, oh man, that jet sweep just went for -5 yards. The Steelers they were tied with the Green Bay Packers and the Buffalo Bills, but technically they weren't tied with the Buffalo Bills because the Buffalo Bills only played 16 games. So they were just ahead of the Buffalo. They had the same number, but they weren't tied with them. There we go. But what's interesting about that is that none of the teams that had fewer rushing plays than the Steelers were teams that had more rushing attempts. The Pittsburgh Steelers were the only team. They were the only team in 2022 to be in the top 10 in rushing attempts and in the top 10 of fewest negative rushing plays. And that's all. That was all. I just asked the simple questions and then drew the conclusion. Nope.
There you go. No, I was waiting for the question.
I'm keeping it a little tight.
There you go. All right. Very good. So let's wrap this up with some final thoughts. Bryan, we'll throw it over to you since Dave just did trivia.
All right. I'm just going to continue on the Matt Canada path. And I'm just going to say this. I'm going to reiterate everything that I've said. I have been wanting Matt Canada gone for a long time now, but it's almost like the pilot when you get on a plane. You put your trust in the pilot to get you to your destination safely. So, look, I can't stop the fact that Matt Canada is still the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, but I have no choice but to root and hope he gets the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense to the playoffs safely. And if he does that, then really all is forgiven if the Steelers have a fantastic year. If he doesn't, once again, the Steelers are going to make a change and clean it up. So basically at this point, it's already happened. We can't change history. We can't change the decision. All we have to do is hope that the decision was a good one.
All right, Dave, final thoughts?
Yeah, and some people like to look at the negatives and stuff, and some people like to look at the positives. And would there have been plenty of positives if the Steelers have moved on from Matt Canada? Sure, there was. Would there be potentials for there to be negatives? Yeah, there would be. And I bet you there'd be Steelers fans that wanted him gone that would instantly point out the negatives as well with him being fired. But he wasn't. So if you want to look at the negatives and you want to look at the struggling in the passing game, you want to look at the points per game and you want to look at those kind of things, you can. But you can also look at some of the good numbers. And if you want good numbers, I'm going to say it again. Go listen to Jeffrey Benedict's cutting room floor on Tuesday because he really laid it out, talking about points per drive and things of that nature. But to me, if there's anything else, if you want to chalk this up as to one thing that you're like, I want to do something to feel okay that the Steelers stuck with Matt Canada, just think then the Steelers rookie quarterback is getting continuity in the system from year one to year two, where he can really focus on other things from year one to year two that he could focus on otherwise than having to do a new system with the new coordinator. That should not have been the sole reason. That should have not been the only reason. If that's the only reason he was retained, that's a bad reason. But if he's retained anyway, then you want to try to find a positive. There you go. I'm trying to give you silver lining. Some fans probably don't even want to hear it right now. And if that's where you are, that's where you are. But you know what? I'm going to be cheering for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't care what the name of the offensive coordinator is. I just want to see him go out there, play well, and win football games.
Play hard. All right, let's get out of here. We'll be back next week for another episode of the Steelers Preview. Make sure you check us out on our audio side, wherever you get your podcast. Search Steelers are Behind the Steel Curtain. In the meantime, Dave, why don't you send us out?
Hey.
See you next week.
Everybody else gets a little tight.